Good morning. Good morning on the eve of the hottest weather that Britain has experienced since there were volcanoes and things, I think. And I want everybody to promise that they'll drink plenty of fluids and stay in the shade, because we are so few right now, I can't afford for any of you to go from sunstroke. There are days when this room rings with laughter, and there are days when sorrow is in charge. There are times when we approach this place with a sense of celebration, and times when it becomes a safe haven from a bitter and divided world. This morning, whatever it may represent for you, let its welcome embrace you, as it has done for so long and for so many people, both here and already gone ahead. So as we light our chalice flame, let us also light up ourselves. Let's see if we can do that with just maybe a smile. A smile would do. Yes, light up our faces. We're here. We're together. Let's start. But before we sing this hymn, I want to tell you something about it. When I was a kid, one summer, I think by accident, I got sent to a fundamentalist Christian camp in North Georgia, a place called Toccoa, Georgia. It's the first time I heard this hymn that we're going to sing, but it had completely different words. It was called Stand Up for Jesus. You nod, you've heard it before. Yeah, high church people have never heard it before, but it's very militaristic. You know, you got to blow the trumpet and march until every foe is vanquished. Christ won't be Lord, and all this stuff. It's very scary. So you're welcome to sing Stand Up for Jesus, but the rest of us will sing number 158, The Flame of Truth is Kindled. They are much better that way, don't you think? Of course, it is a bit Unitarian, going on and on about freedom to worship in a time when nobody much cares one way or the other, but I still like it. Every once in a while you have to sort of take stock And the recent events around here made me take stock quite a lot. I was thinking, I think I've just crossed my 1,000 sermon mark. Not here. Here I think it's 760. But I think it's 1,000 times I have dared to open my mouth. And it made me go looking for something that I knew about. And I found it after a lot of surfing. It's some words by Walt Whitman, which were used in part as the preface to his one great poetic work, Leaves of Grass. It's about how what we say, he's talking specifically about poets and also preachers, is of tremendous importance, and where you have to go to the well to find inspiration. So if you'll indulge me, I'll read that now. Written in 1855. The land and sea, the animals, fishes and birds, the sky of heaven and the orbs, the forests, mountains and rivers are not small themes, but folks expect of the poet to indicate more than the beauty and dignity which always attach to dumb, real objects. They expect him to indicate the path between reality and their souls. Men and women perceive the beauty well enough, probably as well as he. The poetic quality is not marshaled in rhyme or uniformity or abstract addresses to things, nor in melancholy complaints or good precepts, but is a life of these and much else, and lives in the soul. The fluency and ornaments of the finest poems or music or orations or recitations are not independent but dependent. All beauty comes from a beautiful blood and a beautiful brain. If the greatnesses are in conjunction in a man or a woman, that's enough. The fact will prevail through all the universe, but the gaggery and guilt of a million years will not prevail. Who troubles himself about his ornaments or his fluency is lost. So this is what you shall do. Love the earth and the sun and the animals. Despise riches. Give alms to everyone that asks. Stand up for the stupid and crazy. Devote your income and labor to others. Hate tyrants. Argue not concerning God. Have patience and indulgence toward the people. Take off your hat to nothing known or unknown, or to any man or any number of men. Go freely about with powerful and educated persons, and with the young, and with the mothers of families. Re-examine all you have been told in school or church or in any book, and dismiss whatever insults your own soul. And your very flesh shall be a great poem and have the richest fluency, not only in its words, but in the silent lines of its lips and face, and between the lashes of your eyes, and in every motion and every joint of your body. It takes a while to absorb that. It's something that Walt was good at. And I'm wondering if we hear that hammering outside. Is that outside or is it someone in the house? Okay. That's okay. We can live with that. That's all right. This is the part of the service where Law would have played us some beautiful music. So instead, Will is going to play us some beautiful music. Lovely. Really lovely. Thank you. Well, now we've started. So let us now just sit quietly with ourselves and each other. And you out there watching on YouTube, clear the space around you. Let quiet accompany you now for a moment. And let's just feel the warm blood as it floods our bodies. The delicate stirring of the flesh on our necks. The firmness of the floor beneath our feet. Let us feel our arms now just hanging serenely from our shoulders, resting for this little while from the toil of living. And let us feel the strain of muscles in the face, that view that we present to the world as we relax further. And maybe now, just for a moment, hear the sound of our own breathing as we sink comfortably into our own bodies. Now let us readmit the clanging echoes of our thoughts, the memories of the done and yet undone, the injury, the guilty joy, the scheming and doubting and fearing of what is yet to be. Let us acknowledge them and fold them away. Let them come, and even as they arise, let them go. Our feelings now, hot and urgent or drab and listless, settle into the calm that we forge with our stillness. Let us be still. One Spirit called Holy, Giver and Withholder of wisdom, Comforter, Challenger, Maker of lives, let us remember you in the busy round of our days. Give us to know that your voice is also to be heard in the din of traffic, the small talk of friends, and the cries of the needy. In our indifference and self-obsession, we might forget you. But, O Spirit, do not forget us. Let this be our prayer as we say with our whole hearts, so be it. Inshallah. Shalom. Amen. The timing is perfect. Our hammering friends outside, right in silence. It is that way. It's some sort of magic. Let's sing a song, and if they are still doing it after that, we can we can get heavy. Number 219 in the Purple Book. You are the song of my heart. Boy, I love some of those words. Those are the days that are gathered and sifted. I wonder if all words are gathered and sifted. A few years ago, Jilly and I always do the Guardian Quick crossword. In fact, we're not allowed to go to bed until we've done it. And we rarely have to check on the answers, but there was a clue that nearly got us once. And the clue was this: 6 letters that mean tedious admonition. Well, I'll just tell you, sermon. Sermon, and to do that on a Saturday night before I was going to come in here and open my yap in front of all of you. Now, why wasn't that obvious to me? Could it be that I don't think of what I say as being tedious? Or is it that I don't think I'm in the admonition business anyway? Whatever it was, it gave me this little chill. Surely people can't be waiting breathlessly all week to be tediously admonished. That would be a saw, would it? A drill. Could somebody just close the door at least back there? It might help. All you out in cyberspace, we have people doing construction against our rules. No, it's not helping at all. Anyway, what I was going to do is admonish you tediously. And I tried to work out how many sermons I'd done from here, and I came to a figure which I think is pretty close. It's 761, counting today. I prefer to call this pulpit the witness box, like in a courtroom. It's not easy to get into. It's not easy, believe me, even with a few good friends like this, to spew out all this stuff that's been going on in your head for the previous 7 days. I think more of you ought to come up here and have a look from here. I'm sure that 1 or 2 of you have done it when nobody else is in the room. I used to do that. When Marshall Pearson, the Reverend Doctor, was gone, I would go up in his pulpit. And he had gum wrappers and soiled Kleenexes and folded newspapers, and just like here. When I was still in training for the ministry, I went to my first weekend National Ministers Conference. A whole bunch of ministers from all around the country. And I was in the company of people I'd heard of, some of them, but I'd never met. And I was properly awed. One of the sessions we students really looked forward to attending was about choosing a topic for a sermon. At that time, I couldn't imagine writing a sermon every single week. My head had been picked bare by the once a month I had to do in training. So I was keen to know how the real professionals were coping. There was a room full of ministers. It took me a while to realize that all these old boys, all these and girls, all these full-time ministers were just as keen as we students were to figure out a way to think of something to say every Sunday. It appears everybody's got the same problem. The whole institution of the sermon itself is a strange one if you think about it. Originally, it was linked apparently to the idea of conversation. In other words, I'd be saying something and you'd be saying something back. It was interactive in that way. But gradually, as what happens when you stand 6 feet above contradiction, it became a one-way sort of thing. And the only time you hear much about it is afterwards, if you're lucky. I don't hear much myself. I have occasionally heard. But anyway, times have changed since a designated prophet like that could be relied upon to carry the unvarnished word of God around with them all the time. Yes, it was almost always him, sorry, not her. And when a congregation like this one chooses a minister, they are probably, I would say definitely, under no illusions that the person they select will be the embodiment of some special powers or extraordinary holiness. If you do think that, it can be easily disproved. These days our feet of clay are all too apparent. You see, particularly in this part of the country, this was a very intellectual sort of denomination. And a lot of the ministers were required to learn ancient Greek and Latin, for example. And the sermons they gave, normally they would go around 45 minutes to an hour, were more like papers. They were philosophical. They were made as arguments. And the trick was not to show your fatigue with it. I personally never minded that. Henry used to pop off regularly during my sermons. I used to think, good, he's getting some sleep. Remember that? That was great. And there've been and there are other people, I won't mention any names, they're not here, who make terrible faces during the sermon. Faces in which you know they profoundly disagree with you, but they won't get a chance to say anything about it. And you just have to get thick-skinned because nobody's going to come up to you afterwards and say, gosh, that was wonderful. It's happened to me a few times. Law used to do it sometimes. See, that was really great, good old Law. But there was another tradition also in British preaching, mostly up in the north, which was best exemplified by John Wesley, the Methodist, who would preach in the open air to hundreds of people. He inspired his listeners with his evangelical fervor. And we had some like that, mostly, as I say, up north. And that sort of preaching to the masses helped build a string of busy churches that had a mission of Unitarian evangelism, if that's not too much of an oxymoron view. Inspiration is what keeps the pews full in fundamentalist churches. That's why right now You go down the street to one of these Bible bashing churches, you'll find a full house because they're getting inspired. Not only that, they're getting rescued. They're being saved from damnation. They're being made promises. And they're coming together for inspiration. Is what keeps them together for another week. Because Satan is always nibbling away at them, making them doubt. And he has to be rigidly oppressed. And I suppose if I could do something like that here, whatever that would be, I would. The preacher is expected to produce a sense of joyous transcendence. Some people might even call it a high in the congregation. It's useful if you want to raise some money as well. As long as you get the cash before the high fades and people start thinking about their lunch. The creature called the modern Unitarian sermon is a bit more difficult to identify. We don't expect great shiny pearls of wisdom to roll down from this perch, at least I hope we don't. Neither do we expect to lob our crutches and dance in the aisles. And if you've never seen that, I recommend that you go to the next tent show you get a chance to go to. Yeah, you'll see flying crutches. And you'll also see bouncers instead of ushers at the tent flap doors with buckets. And the buckets are for the money that you're going to leave for the holy work that's going on there. Anyway, let's go back to that ministers' conference where I'm sitting there with all these people. And I'm not young at this point, but I am new to the movement. And we were going to brainstorm ideas for coming up with a sermon topic. Some bright spark said they'd like to preach a series. For example, the 3 Unitarian keywords, freedom, reason, and tolerance. So you do 1 week on freedom and another week on reason. And if anybody at all turned up on the 3rd one, they do tolerance. One of the things I've learned in my years of talking for a living is that you never say something like this. Well, there are 4 approaches to the problem. And then rattle on for a while and say, the second approach is, yes, that's when you really start losing them. But they were doing things like you take a hymn, you're desperate, you say, okay, we'll take a hymn you like, and you'll parse it line by line and say something spiritual about it. And I was sitting there feeling really uncomfortable here, because that's not why I signed on to live like a pauper for 2.5 years of training. And I'm listening to all this, and I can't believe it. This is the ministerial elite of our denomination. And I'm sort of grumbling, and I'm talking to a neighbor. And the facilitator, this woman whom I've come to know quite well, glared at me, smiling like a python, and said, perhaps you disagree, Art. Would you like to share your thoughts with us? Oh my God. Oh my God. So I said, well, look, I said, you want people to sit there and listen to you talk for 20 minutes, more or less. I think nearly everybody's going through varying degrees of pain right now and confusion. I think the world has gotten really confusing. Old values have lost their meaning. New ones haven't solidified, take their place. Even the most apparent basic givens of their parents, things like sexual orientation or gender reality, things in marriage, those things, no longer applied. And that the world was becoming dangerous and frightening in brand new ways, that old platitudes not only wouldn't help, they make things worse. And I went on to say we need to be in an ongoing conversation with the people who are kind enough to let us talk once a week and to try to address the issues that might be relevant to them. And that if we didn't do that, we should shut up. Well, there's nothing worse than being lectured to by an absolute beginner. But I have to say that apart from a little chill at the meal times from just a few people, I was treated pretty kindly that weekend. I meant what I said, but I hadn't yet tasted the sheer impossibility of what I was suggesting. When I think about it now, I get what a friend of mine calls a wince wave. It's kind of a cringe that never goes away. It lasts forever when you think about something. Got any wince waves? You can tell me afterwards. Well, since then, I've done some thinking about what makes a good sermon and what makes a bad one. It's important to me. It's my job. So I've reached a conclusion. The good sermons are the simplest and most sincere. It's also better if you've got some story from your own life in it, something that can connect you to the abstractions that you're presenting. The bad ones are where you're trying to be too clever. You can take a simple idea, dress it up with metaphors and anecdotes, reinforce it with quotes and references from philosophers and saints, and before you know it, some very simple truth like, be good to each other, becomes an exercise in confusion and academic one-upmanship. A gilded lily is not just overdone, it's ruined. And the same is true of a sermon. And I've done both from this very spot. And the other thing that makes a good sermon has more to do with listening than speaking. By that I mean hearing between the lines at coffee and other social moments what actually is on the minds of the congregation. What's going on with them? And that's an ongoing struggle. That's an art I haven't mastered, and I'm sure you realize that by now. But just occasionally something else happens. You're talking about something that you mean very sincerely, and people can feel the sincerity coming out of you. And I did this with a sermon once, and I think somewhere down in Sussex. And years later, in Paris, a woman came up to me and said, I was there in wherever it was, Godalming or whatever, when you preached that thing, and I'll never forget it because you changed my life. Oh, good. Good, I said. Good, what was it? She said, it was what you were talking about, the sad circus clown. Well, I've never preached about a sad circus clown. And if I ever do preach about one, I want you to show me the door, please. But that's what she heard. And something happened. Something happened in her. And what was going on was a kind of exchange. I'm willing to give over to you. I'm willing to listen to you. I'm willing to play with you in this game of words. But I'm free to have my own revelations. So that's what I always hope for, something like that. And I should mention one more thing. It's about knowing that you can't always practice what you preach. So if I say there are miracles lying all around us unnoticed at our feet, I'm talking to myself as much as I'm talking to you. And that is the truth. More than once, I've been challenged to act in ways that I've recommended in sermons. I had to admit I wasn't doing all that well. No, not at all. You see, I'm like the Irishman. Is anyone Irish here? You're Irish, okay. There's a story about the Irishman who said, how do I know what I think till I've heard what I have to say? You talk first and understand later. So I listen every week to myself. So I have something else to tell you. I need to hear from you. Come on, we're actually, there's just a few of us here. Sorry about you guys in cyberspace. If you would like to chime in right now, that'd be great. I mean, who says a sermon has to go a full 20 minutes anyway, because this one hasn't. So I would love to hear from you. You can even climb up in here into the witness box if you want to. Maybe it's your turn. Amen. Lovely message from Freddie. Freddie's got COVID, so that's why she's not here, but hopefully she'll be back next week. Now COVID just isn't rare. People just getting COVID all over the place. Coming up in a couple of weeks, I'm having a day procedure, the insertion of a pacemaker. It may be that following Sunday I won't be here because I'll be sore or something like that. But if that happens, I'll try to get a good replacement and let them tediously admonish you in my absence. Yes. The more tedious, the better. Yeah. Mark, should we make a collection of our funds? I'm interested that we have that hymn as "What Purpose Burns Within Our Hearts." What is the name of that in the classical version?
Forth in thy name, O Lord, I go.
What's the name of the tune?
The Angel Song.
Ah.
It's by Orlando Gibbon, Elizabethan.
I think it's going to be, there'll be a book someday and somebody comparing Unitarian lyrics to the others and trying to puzzle out why. Yes. Let's sing one of my favorite songs. Anyway, let's sing, even though we're about to part, let's sing "Here We Have Gathered," number 62 in the Purple Book.
Come and stand inside.
Now may our mere words remind each other of the soul's wisdom. May our eyes be clear of the dust of mere confusion. May our hearts remain open to life and growth and change and love. And for this, may we look after one another because we know we can until we meet again. Amen.